We're live at Expert35. As promised, 35 different industries, experts from each industries, talking about the challenges, talking about the hardship, and talking about the opportunity. Today, I got Bradley. He's a business legal expert. Bradley, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Well, we got a big lineup today, staying out of trouble, obviously. Thank you, Brad. And then we got security. We've got how to brand your life with your phone and your business with just your phone. And then we're going to talk about college, higher education. Everybody's that's all up in the air. So join us at Expert35, but we're going to get right into it. If you want to follow us, text Expert35 to the number on the screen. But today we're talking about just COVID-19 reopening and what those challenges are going to bring. Because with it, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of people getting upset, and that leads to lawyers, unfortunately. And I think that's why we have Expert19. So Bradley O'Neill, legal expert, business legal expert, text Expert19, and you'll be able to follow everything that we're talking about, some of the resources. But let's get right to it. Hey, Bradley, thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
No problem. Tell us a little bit before we get into it. Tell us a little bit about your background, like how did you get into this, and a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So I graduated from, I grew up, born and raised here in Houston, and then I graduated from the University of Texas in 2004, went on to law school at SMU, and after law school moved back here and have been practicing law in Houston ever since. So I started, working at my own firm back in 2014, and so for several years now I've been doing it and really enjoying it.
Great, and great having you. This is so timely. We're opening up again. Everybody's kind of like on edge, right? And one of the conversations we're having offline was like, hey, disasters lead to litigation, right? So
they certainly do.
What should we expect as Texas opens back up, as the U.S. opens back up?
Absolutely. So it's all sorts of litigation that can happen that arise from various types of things like this. So really, the coronavirus, just like it affects every facet of people's lives, it can affect every so many different types of litigation can come up in this type of context. The most common of which I would say just involves standard deals of people who are not able to either pay their bills or unable to be paid. So creditor debtor issues and things of that sort. But it can also arise in tort cases, multiple other criminal law, different. I don't think there's a area of the law that will not see some type of effect or have some type of dispute involving this issue.
Well, one of the things we're seeing is, I'm already hearing it, right? Is this is one of the highest number of companies being created. And people are out of necessity. We have 30 million, I don't even know the number anymore, like 32 million people unemployed, right? And necessity is going to make them want to create an income for themselves. Absolutely. So, being an entrepreneur myself and somebody in that business spectrum, I always say like, hey, you got to be covered, right? Have a business plan, but also talk to lawyers, have a structure, have some sort of an agreement in place. And I just see these guys, man, I need to make money. They're kind of skipping all those things, maybe going online, maybe, right? What do you think is gonna, what's that liability look like? And if you could just interrupt them right now and say, hey, before you go out there and start offering handyman services or whatever it is that you could do, what would you want to say to them?
Substantial. Potentially you'd always want to be able to have some kind of entity in place that would protect you from some kind of, from liability to the extent possible, as well as insurance. And as your business grows, you want to basically increase the, for when you're starting out, let's say you're starting a very small business, setting up the LLC is, the main, that's step one, along with, trying to get some type of insurance, ideally. Let's say it grows and you want to create a partner. That's when you'd want to come in and create a more detailed partnership agreement and do all that. So basically, the more your business grows, the more elaborate your structure needs to be.
And before you get in there, because I know, this is like your lingo, right? And I'm kind of in that world. Obviously, you're on the legal side of it. LLC. Tell people what that LLC means.
I'm sorry. Limited liability company. There's several different companies, entities that people can create. Back in the day, there was Inc., which was a corporation, which was the most popular. Today, I would say the most popular is the limited liability company, which can be taxed like an Inc. or like a partnership, like a pass-through, depending on what the company, how they want to set it up. So it gives you some more variability, and it's generally become kind of the most popular structure.
I will say the most popular structure is not even a structure, right? It's a DBA.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a
And
lot
it was
more.
like, I got a DBA, but a DBA just means I just have a name, and
Right,
and all the liability basically falls on that person's,
right.
as well. So an LLC basically separates your liability,
Right. It
right?
can.
Mhm.
It can. You always have to be. One thing that sometimes people don't realize is when you set up an LLC for any kind of actions that the person personally does, like let's say that you set up an LLC and you have some kind of action where someone's suing that person individually as well. So it doesn't provide as much foolproof protection as people think. That being said, it's totally worth it to have it because any kind of contracts the business signs, things like that, are not. You'll say the business signs a lease as long as
Right.
it's not guaranteed. If that business can't pay it, then the LLC is the one, who is.
Holds liability. Got it. Got it. Well, we already have some questions. Obviously, one of the challenges is people are reopening. There's gonna be. I mean, I've heard horror stories of people getting upset and like getting mad because we've been cooped up for 8 months,
Right.
right? So there's gonna be issues on both sides, right? So here's a good question from Greg. In the event of disagreement, and I'll put you front and center about responsibility for loss. What is the most efficient way to resolve the disagreement?
Okay. So, like, basically, is he talking about like, okay, a loss for like a business loss that arises from the coronavirus, right? Like some kind of business, even of a disagreement about responsibility for loss. Okay. So, what I think he's talking about there is business interruption. A lot of businesses spend a lot of money to buy this business interruption insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, essentially, what the only problem with that is that the way the policies are often written is it requires an event to have occurred, some kind of event that causes the loss. So, like whether or not it's a an earthquake or just any kind of natural disaster. Here, specifically, there's not necessarily a physical loss when it's a pandemic, and so the a lot of the policies exclude that. So what? But there's several lawyers out there, not necessarily me, who are out there trying to challenge the ability of whether or not these business interruption policies cover the coronavirus losses. So it's worth following that and being able to kind of track those track those sort of cases, and then also speak to your insurance agent. And
Right.
if there's a if there's any potential to be get a recovery from that, by all means do it.
And one of the things that I learned during Harvey, and we're in Houston, so Harvey was a big disaster, very different type. But I realized that sometimes filing a claim, even if you're going to deny it, at least prove to you that now you could qualify for a different program, right? So sometimes it's okay to like file knowing that you may get um, denied, and then that just gives you the tools necessary for the next step, right? Because obviously in this crisis, maybe there's a follow up, right? Something else that can help, and you can qualify for other legal recourse.
Absolutely, especially anything filed in good faith and everything like that. That's right now, for example, there's numerous people after Harvey seeking compensation from the U.S. government arising from these floods, alleging it was a taking. Thousands of people. What the recovery's been kind of ongoing for all a long time, but no, sometimes filing the claim is not necessarily is worthwhile. There's a lot of downside in not doing it if there is a recovery.
Right. Here's a great question. What steps should a company take if threatened with litigation over a supply chain disruption? So I guess there's supply chain disruption. Like what can they do?
Yeah, like okay, so if threatened with litigation over, so that's basically saying there that if so if a supplier is not going to, I guess what they're saying there is if a supplier doesn't, they can't provide a product, for example. Like there's one interesting one you're seeing now is that companies out there that are can't go provide a certain service. Let's say you're supposed to finish, deliver something by 30 days, and yet your factory is closed, and so you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an area where, but litigation can clearly occur because if the person ordered it and the contract says to be provided by that date, what sort of happens. You can see how that can lead to a dispute. Certain contracts have what's called a force majeure clause, which means that an act of what they call them acts of God will
Right.
basically not or things that are outside your control would prevent you from doing something can provide a defense. In most circumstances, I haven't seen as much with that. I'm sure it's going on, but ideally, it would be in the benefit of both parties to kind of work it out and try to figure out some kind of reasonable accommodation, I guess, rather than try to be kind of litigate into uncharted territory.
Is COVID-19 considered an act of God?
That's a good question. I would say it would be. I would say
Yeah.
that it's a. I would say it's a. Just a virus, something that wasn't expected. So it depends on the clause of that particular contract, I would guess. But
Right.
it. But I would certainly say it is.
Well, until let's keep going down the line is like, what are our rights as an employee right now?
Generally your rights as an employee are pretty limited. Your employer can fire you, and
Mm-hmm.
you can quit. It's an at will employment. So at any time. And so, what you see that's interesting with COVID is that there's obviously certain situations where you could, where you could have where you could probably pursue some type of claim. The first one would be anything where it's in a violation of equal opportunity, EEO laws is what they're,
Right.
so equal, so if someone's discriminating against you based on your race, gender,
Right.
anything like that, for layoffs, which a lot of people are about to be laid off, and so normally limited, very limited rights under that. Another
And
part,
Texas has some interesting rules around non-competes, correct?
right? Absolutely, yeah. And so that's the, and so yeah. So obviously you can have certain people with non-competes in effect and stuff like that, and you always want to abide by those
Mm-hmm.
whenever yeah.
Here's a good little follow-up question we got. How should employers handle, or how employers handle employees who are not coming back to work?
Companies have sort of done this differently and stuff like that, and it's another one where you're sort of wading into uncharted territory. And so, I mean, remember we were talking about the one interesting one with Bass Pro Shop employees, where it was
Mm-hmm.
declared an essential business and they didn't want to come back to work. Biggest one is whether or not they're eligible for unemployment, because if you don't come to work, normally you've quit, and so when you quit, you don't get your unemployment. Here, you have certain employees though that literally can't come to. They might have situations that would really prevent them from coming to work, and I believe there's been some sort of exceptions put in place there for those, so it's a little bit different. But in general, you'd like to have companies work with their employees to the extent possible to accommodate, but while recognizing in certain cases that won't be possible, and
Right.
making sure you check to make sure eligibility benefits, and obviously never discriminate under any circumstance. That's the worst thing you can do.
Well, we got a question about real estate, which I think is timely because I mean the market is crazy, right? We've had other experts talking about interest rates. We've had experts talking about buying. So I don't know if you can see the whole question, but it says, "What are the biggest mistakes do you see buyers doing when making real estate investments?"
Absolutely, that's from my wife Gina. It's the biggest mistake. It's the biggest mistake on buying on buying real estate is ignoring the inspection. So it's two ways you can do that. You have certain buyers who will go out and they will just buy a house and not worry about getting it inspected and seeing any kind of problems with the home, or you have certain people who kind of fall in love with the home and then basically don't. Inspect, and don't ignore, clear issues in the inspection report. And usually, once you close on a property, you're going to run into big, problems if there's issues with it. You sort of have, with very limited exceptions, it becomes your problem at that point.
Perfect. All right, my favorite part of the show: 3 things we should do right now. Go for it.
Okay, 3 things you should do. Okay, number 1, I would say the coronavirus. So if you have a business right now where you have a large number of people that potentially could, have infected people, a medical office, anything like that, you would want to have some type of waiver agreement in place, basically allowing people knowing that they're accepting some kind of risk coming to your business. In some businesses, less practical than others to do that, but it's something that should be feasibly considered, in my opinion. The second thing would be that if you have a PPP loan, that make sure to allocate the proceeds of that loan so that the loan would be forgivable. And obviously, it's forgivable in certain circumstances, not forgivable in others. So you want to be very careful about that. Situation number 3, review your business interruption insurance policies. Keep apprised of that. So if you could ever get coverage for it, that would be something that would obviously be beneficial. So it's kind of worth talking to your insurance agent about that issue.
Great advice. Again, thank you for joining us. Expert19, not because of COVID-19. You just Expert19, but you are
19th expert. Very good.
That's Expert19 to the number on the screen. We're gonna let you go into the notes and put some of the resources, because we got questions like, hey, what do you think about Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom? And we talked offline. We said, hey, these resources are better than no resources, but it also means like, how much liability and exposure do you have? Right. Like if you're just starting out, great. Right. And now I think your wife's saying that the question was for a friend. So but no, there's a couple questions that we need to answer. Put some of the resource on there. So great having you on the show, Bradley. Thank you for being with us today on Expert 35.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, get legal advice. I mean, I know one of the top 3 things is like get legal advice. If you're starting a company, if you have questions, if you're feeling like it's better to talk to a lawyer before you need to talk to a lawyer. And I'm talking from experience.
Absolutely. No,
the worst time to talk to a lawyer is when you need a lawyer. Absolutely. So it's great. I mean, and lawyers will talk to you to like kind of understand what you're looking for. Those are usually, like a free, introduction to see if you're a good fit. Lawyers they're not a commodity. They're like a partner. They're going to be a partner in your business. And that's why we have somebody like, that's why we have Bradley on this Expert 35, because of the way that he works with his clients and ties everything together really makes you feel like you've got somebody in your team. And it's better to have somebody on your team now. Practice. He'll know your contracts. He'll know your strategy. And moving forward, when there is a misstep or there is COVID-19, I mean, like this isn't things we could all plan for. I mean, at least you've got somebody that there's batting for you. So super timely, Bradley. Thank you so much for being on the show. We'll jump on there so you can answer some of the questions. But thank you so much for being on Expert 35.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thanks.
All right, guys, we've got a great lineup. We're going to talk about security. We're going to talk about some of the travel. We're going to talk about branding. We've got college, higher education. So thank you so much for being with us on Expert 35. We'll leave Bradley's info up on the screen, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
We educate during difficult times. We collaborate at Expert 35. This is for a better tomorrow and a better today. Let's come together and together we will find a way. You got questions, we got solutions. You got problems, we got resolutions. Visit expert35.com. No need to worry.